After coming home from surgery, my husband called me into the kitchen. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "There's something I've hidden from you for 14 years. My heart stopped. For weeks, I'd been convinced he'd been lying to me. I had seen him leaving a motel with another woman. I'd found a birthday card signed by a teenage girl who called him Dad. I'd watched him disappear every October without ever explaining where he went. I thought I already knew the truth. I was wrong. What he told me that night didn't destroy our marriage. It changed everything I believed about the man I'd loved for 14 years. My name is Elena, and I am 45 years old. For the past 22 years, I have taught 3rd grade at Oak Ridge Elementary School. I love the smell of crayons, and the way small hands reach for mine when a child needs reassurance. My life has always felt steady, built on routines that brought comfort lesson plans on Sunday evenings, fresh coffee in the staff room, and coming home to the same quiet house on Maplewood Lane. My husband David is 48. He is a structural engineer who designs bridges and high-rises that will outlast us both. He has strong hands and a quiet way of listening that made me fall in love with him the first time we met. We have been married for 14 years. We have no children. It was a choice we made together after years of trying and failing, followed by a gentle acceptance that our family would simply be the two of us. Some people pitied us. We never pitied ourselves. David would say, "We have each other," and that's already more than enough, and I believed him with my whole heart. Our marriage was the kind people whispered about with envy. David never raised his voice. He remembered anniversaries without prompts. He left little notes in my lunch bag on difficult teaching days, silly drawings of stick figure teachers surrounded by hearts. On weekends, we hiked the trails near the lake, or read side by side on the porch swing, his arm draped casually over my shoulder. We had survived the usual storms: his mother's long illness, my father's death, financial strains when the construction industry slowed, but we emerged closer each time. Then, 3 months ago, everything tilted. David had been complaining of chest pain for weeks, dismissing it as stress. One Tuesday evening, he collapsed in the garage while unloading tools. The ambulance ride to the hospital remains a blur of flashing lights, and my own voice repeating, "Please stay with me." The diagnosis was severe coronary artery disease. Emergency bypass surgery was scheduled within days. I barely slept during his hospital stay. I sat beside his bed holding his hand, watching the monitors beep their steady rhythm. Nurses came and went. I brought his favorite books and played soft music on my phone. In the quiet hours between visiting times, memories flooded back. I remembered the day we met 14 years ago at a charity gala for firefighters. I was there as a teacher representative. David had come because his best friend from college was a fire captain. He stood tall in a simple dark suit, his smile warm but reserved. We talked about books and old houses. By the end of the night, he had asked for my number with the gentle confidence that would become his signature. 6 months later, we were married in a small garden ceremony. No extravagance, just us, our closest friends, and the promise that we would always choose each other. He had always been kind. When my students' parents struggled, David would quietly donate supplies to my classroom. When I cried over a difficult parent conference, he listened without trying to fix everything immediately. He cooked dinner on my late nights. He never complained when I brought home stray animals or volunteered for extra school events. Our life together felt safe, predictable in the best possible way. But something had begun to shift in the months leading up to his surgery. It started with small things I tried to ignore. A hotel receipt in his jacket pocket for a night he claimed to have worked late at the office. Strange phone calls he took outside, voice low. Then there were the disappearances, always on the same date, each month, sometimes overnight. He would kiss my forehead and say only, "I have something I need to handle. I'll be back soon." No further explanation. When I pressed gently, he would smile that reassuring smile and change the subject. I found credit card charges to an unknown account. A birthday card tucked in his desk drawer, written in a young girl's handwriting, "Happy birthday, Dad. I love you more than words." The paper smelled faintly of strawberry shampoo. My stomach twisted every time I thought about it. I told myself I was being paranoid. David had never given me real reason to doubt him. Yet the evidence kept piling up like unwelcome snow. One afternoon I followed him ashamed, even as I did it, and watched from across the street as he embraced a teenage girl outside a modest apartment building. She looked about 16 with long dark hair and David's gentle eyes. He hugged her tightly, then handed her an envelope. She called him something I couldn't quite hear, but the shape of her mouth looked like Dad. My world cracked that day. Still his surgery loomed. I pushed the suspicions down deep. I focused only on keeping him alive. I held his hand through pre-op whispered old jokes, told him how much I loved him. When they wheeled him away, I prayed like I hadn't prayed since childhood. The surgery was successful. David came home thinner, paler, but breathing on his own. The doctors said recovery would take time, but he was lucky. We were lucky. 2 days after he returned, I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard his voice from downstairs. "Elena, can you come to the kitchen?" His tone was serious. Heaviness hung in the air. I walked down slowly, heart hammering. The man I loved stood by the counter, still in his robe, looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, equal parts fear and relief. "We need to talk," he said quietly. I sat down at the table, hands trembling in my lap. All the evidence I had collected flashed through my mind: the motel, the girl, the money transfers, the annual disappearances. I braced myself for the confession I thought would end us. Instead, David looked at me for a long, long time, as if memorizing my face. Word count for part 1, so far approximately 950, continuing seamlessly into the emotional buildup as planned. I waited, breath caught in my throat. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Outside, birds sang as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis. David reached across the table but didn't quite touch my hand, as though afraid I might pull away. In that moment, every doubt I had pushed aside came roaring back. The marriage I thought was perfect suddenly felt like a beautiful lie I had told myself for 14 years. Yet even as pain bloomed in my chest, love for this man, the one who had stood beside me through every hardship, refused to die. I needed answers. I needed the truth, whatever it cost us. The weeks leading up to David's surgery had been torture. I replayed every strange moment like a broken film reel that wouldn't stop spinning. At night, while he slept in the hospital bed, I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair and let the memories consume me. It began innocently enough, or so I thought. About 6 months before the collapse, David started receiving late-night calls. He would slip out to the backyard speaking in hushed tones. When I asked who it was, he'd say it was work, a difficult project with tight deadlines. I wanted to believe him. He had always been dedicated to his job, but engineers don't usually get calls at midnight from numbers with no caller ID. Then came the hotel receipt. I found it while doing laundry. The Regency Inn 30 miles away, dated for a night he told me he was at a conference in the city. When I casually mentioned it, he hesitated for just a second too long before saying the firm had changed venues last minute. His eyes didn't meet mine. That was the first real crack. I tried to push it away. David had never been unfaithful in 14 years. He came home every night. He still kissed me goodbye each morning. Our intimacy hadn't faded. But doubt, once planted, grows like ivy, silent and relentless. One crisp October afternoon, I saw him with her. I had taken the day off to prepare for parent-teacher conferences. David said he was meeting a client on the other side of town. Curiosity and a growing fear drove me to drive past the address he had mentioned. Instead of an office building, I parked across from a quiet residential street. There he was, my husband, standing on the sidewalk with a girl who couldn't have been older than 16. She had long, straight brown hair and wore a school backpack. David pulled her into a hug, the kind a father gives a daughter after a long absence. He handed her a small gift bag. She smiled up at him with such open affection that my stomach dropped. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw her lips move. The shape was unmistakable, Dad. I drove home in tears, parked in the garage, and sat there until the engine cooled. When David returned that evening, he acted completely normal. He asked about my day, helped with dinner, and later held me close while we watched television. I lay awake beside him, wondering how the man I loved could lead a double life. The birthday card was the next blow. While David was at a follow-up appointment, I searched his home office, something I had never done before. Tucked inside an old planner was a card with colorful balloons on the front. Inside, in neat teenage handwriting, "Happy 16th birthday, Dad. Thank you for everything you do for me. I don't know where I'd be without you. Love forever, your girl." No last name. Just that devastating word, Dad. Money transfers appeared in our joint account statements, regular amounts sent to an account I didn't recognize. Not huge sums, but consistent. Enough to cover rent, groceries, school supplies for someone. Every month like clockwork. And then the disappearances. Every October on the same date, David would leave early and return late the next day, sometimes with the faint scent of smoke or flowers on his clothes. He never explained. When I asked directly, he would say, "It's something from my past I need to handle alone." His voice was always gentle but firm. A wall I couldn't climb. I confided in my best friend Sarah one rainy afternoon over coffee. We had been friends since college. She listened without judgment as I poured out every suspicion. "Elena, it looks bad," she admitted, squeezing my hand. "But David, he worships you. Wait until after the surgery. He's not strong enough for this conversation now. If it's an affair, you'll deal with it when he's recovered. Don't let fear make decisions for you." Her words were wise, but they didn't stop the nightmares. I imagined him with another woman building a secret family. I pictured the girl, our daughter, living in that apartment while I played the oblivious wife. The pain was physical, a constant ache behind my ribs. During David's hospital stay, I pushed it all down. I focused on his recovery. I brought his favorite meals read to him from the mystery novel he was halfway through and told him stories about my students to make him smile. When the doctors said the surgery went well, relief flooded me. But the questions remained circling like vultures. Now back home, standing in our kitchen, David looked at me with those same gentle eyes that had once made me feel safest in the world. The weight of 14 years of hidden truth hung between us. "I've hidden something from you for 14 years, he repeated softly. My mind raced. This was it, the moment he would confess the affair, the secret daughter, the other life. I prepared myself for the end of everything we had built. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall yet. I wanted to hear him say it. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how brutal. David took a slow breath as if gathering courage for the hardest thing he had ever done. The man who had faced collapsing buildings and dangerous construction sites now looked terrified of the woman sitting across from him. Outside, the afternoon light slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. Inside, my perfect marriage felt like it was about to shatter. I braced myself for the worst. In my mind, I had already rehearsed the scene 100 times, David admitting he had fallen in love with someone else, that the girl was his daughter, from a long-ago affair, that the motel meetings were stolen moments with her mother. I imagined the divorce papers, the empty house, the pitying looks from friends. My hands clenched so tightly under the table that my nails dug into my palms. David reached out and finally took my hand. His grip was warm but weak from the recent surgery. He looked exhausted, yet there was a strange peace in his eyes. "Elena," he began, voice low and steady. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. But every word is true. I've carried this alone for 14 years because I made a promise, and I was terrified of losing you if you knew." He paused, searching my face. I nodded once, unable to speak. 14 years ago, before we met, I was still working as a firefighter. It was my second year on the job. October 12th. I'll never forget that date. My breath caught. October. The disappearances. The pieces were already shifting, but I couldn't see the picture yet. We got called to a house fire in the old neighborhood near the river. It was bad, fully engulfed when we arrived. Family of 3 parents and their 8-year-old daughter. The parents were trapped on the 2nd floor. I was part of the team that went in. David's eyes grew distant, as if he were back in the smoke. The heat was unbearable. We found the father first. He was badly burned but conscious. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "My daughter," he gasped. "Please, she's in the back bedroom." We pushed through. The little girl, Sophie, was huddled under her bed, terrified but alive. We got her out just as the roof started to collapse. He swallowed hard. The father. Before the medics took him, he looked at me. His face was charred, but his eyes were clear. He squeezed my hand and said, "Promise me she'll never grow up alone. Promise me you'll make sure she has someone." I promised. In that moment, with the house burning around us, I gave him my word. David's voice cracked slightly. Both parents died that night. Sophie survived with minor injuries. She had no other family, no grandparents, no aunts or uncles. Child Services placed her in the system. I tried to adopt her, but as a single firefighter with a dangerous job, they turned me down. I didn't have the stability they required. I stared at him, the kitchen fading around us. This wasn't the confession I expected. No mistress, no secret child of his own. "So, what did you do?" I whispered. I kept my promise the only way I could. I stayed in her life without her knowing who I was at first. I set up a trust fund anonymously, paid for her foster care upgrades, school fees, tutoring, therapy after the trauma. I hired a private investigator to make sure she was safe in every placement. When she turned 13 and started asking questions about her past, I arranged a meeting through a counselor. I told her I was the firefighter who saved her. She started calling me Dad because she needed one. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. Every October 12th, we visit the site of the old house. We lay flowers. We talk about her parents. I tell her stories about their bravery that night. The rest of the year, I send money gifts letters. I never told you because I was afraid you'd think I was obsessed or that it would take away from us. I didn't want you to feel like you were sharing me with a ghost from my past. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and showed me a photo. The girl Sophie smiling beside David at what looked like a school event. No romantic embrace, just quiet paternal pride. The motel, I met her mother's old friend there once to get more information about Sophie's medical history. The call's updates from her caseworker. The birthday card she made it for me. I felt the ground shift beneath me. All the evidence that had tormented me for months suddenly had innocent explanations. The weight I had carried, the fear of betrayal, lifted so suddenly, it left me dizzy. David continued, voice gaining strength. "I never touched another woman. I never wanted to. You are my life, Elena. But this promise, it was sacred. Made in fire and death. I couldn't break it. After the surgery, I realized I might not have much time left. I couldn't die without you knowing. If something happened to me, Sophie would be alone again. I needed you to understand." He slid a small wooden box across the table toward me. "These are the letters I wrote to her every year. I never signed them with my name, just someone who cares. I wanted her to know she was loved, even if she didn't know by whom." I opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were 14 envelopes, neatly dated, each one thicker than the last. David watched me, vulnerable in a way I had never seen. "I love you more than anything," he said. "And I'm sorry I hid this. But I kept my word to a dying man. Can you forgive me for that?" The kitchen was silent except for the sound of my quiet sobs. Everything I thought I knew about my husband had been wrong. He wasn't a cheater. He was a man who had carried an enormous invisible burden for 14 years out of pure honor. In that moment, my love for him didn't break. It expanded. The wooden box sat between us like a bridge across 14 years of silence. I picked up the first envelope, dated the year after the fire. The handwriting was unmistakably David's neat engineer's precision, but the words were soft, almost fatherly. "Dear Sophie, today you turned 9. I hope the new school is treating you well. You are stronger than you know. Your parents would be so proud of how bravely you faced everything. Keep smiling. The world needs your light. No signature. Just a small drawing of a phoenix rising from ashes at the bottom." I looked up at David, my vision blurred. "All this time, you were being her guardian angel." He nodded slowly. "She wasn't my daughter by blood. She became my responsibility by fire. After I met her properly when she was 13, our relationship grew. She needed someone steady. I tried to be that without disrupting her life or ours. He told me everything then. How Sophie had bounced between foster homes until a kind couple took her in permanently when she was 11. How he had quietly paid for her extracurricular activities, piano lessons, soccer therapy sessions to process the trauma. How he had attended her school plays from the back row unseen. How every October 12th they met at the empty lot where the house once stood. They placed white roses for her mother and red for her father. They sat on the grass and talked about what her life might have been. The girl you saw me hugging, David said gently, that was Sophie. She had just gotten her driver's permit. I was proud. I wasn't meeting a lover. I was meeting the child I promised to protect. Piece by piece, the puzzle I thought spelled betrayal reassembled into something beautiful and heartbreaking. The hotel receipt, David had met with Sophie's guidance counselor there because the woman preferred neutral ground and had a family emergency that day. The money transfers direct deposits into a college savings fund he set up for her. The mysterious calls, Sophie herself, or updates from the private social worker he paid to ensure her well-being. Even the birthday card made sense now. Sophie had wanted to give something personal to the man who had become her anchor. I felt foolish then, ashamed then, overwhelmingly grateful. Foolish for assuming the worst. Ashamed for doubting the man who had shown me nothing but love. Grateful that the marriage I thought was ending was actually deeper than I had ever imagined. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, voice thick. David sighed. At first I didn't want to burden you. We were newly married, building our life. Then years passed, and it became this secret I didn't know how to share without sounding like I had a hidden family. I saw how happy you were with just us. I was afraid it would change things, make you feel second place, or force us to take on a child we had chosen not to have. I carried it alone because I love you too much to risk hurting you. Tears fell freely now. I stood up and moved around the table to sit in his lap, careful of his healing chest. He wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time in months, the embrace felt completely honest. We talked for hours that afternoon. He showed me more photos, Sophie at her high school graduation, smiling brightly in her cap and gown. Sophie volunteering at an animal shelter. Sophie learning to drive with David in the passenger seat, both of them laughing at her jerky stops. She's an incredible young woman, he said. She wants to become a pediatric nurse. She says she wants to help children the way no one could fully help her after the fire. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across our kitchen, I realized how many times I had almost confronted him. How close I had come to shattering our marriage over misunderstandings. The relief was profound, but so was the new understanding of my husband. This was the man I married, not perfect, but profoundly good. That evening, David rested on the couch while I made soup. My mind kept returning to Sophie. The girl I had seen as a threat was actually a living testament to David's character. I no longer saw her as the other. I saw her as someone who had survived hell and come out kind. Before bed, I opened another letter from the box. This one was from 2 years ago. Dear Sophie, life will knock you down. It did to me many times, but you get back up. You help others. You honor your parents by living fully. I'm always here even if you can't see me every day. I closed the letter and held it to my chest. David watched me from the doorway, a soft smile on his face. You don't have to share me, he whispered. But if you ever want to meet her, she knows about you. She's always wanted to thank the woman who makes me happy. I nodded, overwhelmed. The marriage I thought was perfect had been even better than I knew, built not just on love between us, but on quiet, steadfast compassion that reached beyond our home. The days after David's confession passed in a gentle haze. He rested as the doctors ordered while I moved through our home with new eyes. The secrets that had once felt like shadows now felt like light, revealing depths in my husband I had never fully seen. But the wooden box still called to me. Those 14 letters represented a hidden chapter of his life, one he had never planned to share. One quiet evening, as rain pattered against the windows, David brought the box to the living room. We sat together on the couch, a blanket over his legs. His surgery scars were still tender, a physical reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. I wrote these thinking I might never show them to anyone, he said. Especially not you. After the surgery, when the anesthesia was wearing off, I woke up terrified. What if I didn't make it? Who would continue watching over Sophie? Who would keep the promise? He opened the box and handed me the most recent letter written just weeks before his heart episode. I unfolded the paper carefully. David's handwriting filled the page with warmth. Dear Sophie, you're 17 now, almost an adult. I've watched you grow from a frightened little girl into a young woman with so much compassion. Remember, strength isn't never falling down, it's getting up every time life pushes you. Your parents taught you courage by example. Live it. Forgive those who fail you because holding anger only burns you. Be kind, especially to those who seem to need it least. Study hard, but don't forget to laugh. And know that somewhere someone is incredibly proud of you. Tears blurred the words. Each letter was like this gentle guidance lessons wrapped in love. I read another from when Sophie was 12. Dear Sophie, school can be hard. Kids can be cruel. But you are not defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you choose to become. Learn everything you can. Help others when you can. And on hard days, remember the firefighters who ran into the fire for you. There is goodness in this world worth fighting for. David sat quietly as I read through several more. Some were short, others longer. One included a pressed wildflower. Another had a small quote from a book they had discussed. Every single one ended with the same quiet assurance she was not alone. I never signed them, he explained. I didn't want her to feel obligated. I wanted her to feel loved unconditionally the way a parent should love. I cried openly now, leaning into his shoulder. You gave her a father when the world took hers away. All these years while I thought we were just living our quiet life, you were doing this beautiful, difficult thing. He stroked my hair. I was afraid it would change how you saw me, or that you'd want to take her in completely, and I knew we had chosen not to have children. I tried to protect both of you, Sophie, from instability, and you from carrying this weight. We spent the evening reading the letters together. Some made us laugh, stories of Sophie's first science fair project that caught fire ironically. Others brought fresh tears the year she struggled with nightmares about the fire, and David anonymously paid for a specialized therapist. By the time we reached the final letter, the one written right before his surgery, I understood the depth of my husband's heart, in a way I never had before. If you're reading this because something happened to me, know that I kept my promise as best I could. Live fully, Sophie. Make your parents proud. And if Elena is there, thank her for me. She gave me the strength to keep going. I set the letter down and turned to David. I love you, I whispered. Not despite this. Because of it. You are the best man I've ever known. We held each other for a long time. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. In the warmth of our living room, the last remnants of doubt dissolved completely. The man I had suspected of the worst had been living up to the highest ideals of love and duty. That night, as I lay beside him, listening to his steady breathing, I felt profound peace. The letters weren't just messages to Sophie, they were a window into David's soul, a soul that had room for both me and a broken child who needed him. Our marriage hadn't been diminished by his secret. It had been made richer. A few weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. David and I were in the kitchen making pancakes, our small ritual of normalcy returning after his recovery. He glanced at me, a nervous but hopeful smile on his face. That's her, he said softly. Are you ready? I took a deep breath and nodded. My heart raced, but it was no longer from fear. It was anticipation. When I opened the door, Sophie stood there. She was 22 now, tall and graceful with kind eyes, and the same warm smile I had glimpsed from afar. She wore scrubs, her hair tied back professionally. In her hands was a small bouquet of white and red roses. Hi, she said, voice gentle. I'm Sophie. Thank you for letting me come. I stepped aside, inviting her in. David appeared behind me, and Sophie's face lit up. She hugged him carefully, mindful of his healing body. You're the reason I survived, she told him, voice thick with emotion. Not just that night, but every day since. David's eyes shone. You did the hard work, kiddo. I'm just glad to see you thriving. Then Sophie turned to me. For a moment we simply looked at each other, the wife and the girl who had unknowingly been part of our marriage for so long. Thank you, she said, for sharing him with me. I know it wasn't easy when you didn't understand. I pulled her into my arms. It was the first time we embraced, but it felt natural, like closing a circle. I'm sorry it took me so long to know you, I whispered. You're welcome here. Always. We spent the afternoon together. Sophie told stories from her life, her college years, the challenges of nursing school, the children she cared for in pediatrics who reminded her of her younger self. She wanted to specialize in trauma care for kids. I want to be there when they're scared, she explained, like someone should have been for me. David listened with quiet pride. I watched them interact, the easy affection, the inside jokes about her terrible driving lessons, and felt no jealousy, only warmth. Our home, which had felt like just the two of us for so long now, held space for this young woman who had become part of our story. She helped us in the garden, laughed at David's dad jokes, and complimented my teaching stories. When she left that evening, she hugged us both again. I'll come back soon, she promised, if that's okay. It's more than okay, I said. As her car pulled away, David slipped his arm around my waist. We stood on the porch watching the sunset. We never had children of our own, he said quietly. But somehow we helped raise one. Together. I leaned my head on his shoulder. She's going to change lives just like you changed hers. Ending. That night as we lay in bed, I realized something profound. The biggest secrets aren't always about betrayal. Sometimes they're about promises too sacred to break. And loving someone means trusting that not every silence is a lie. David had carried an enormous weight alone for 14 years, not out of deceit, but out of honor. In doing so, he had not only kept a dying man's last wish, but had shaped a young woman into someone extraordinary. Our marriage, which I once feared was fracturing, had proven stronger than I ever imagined. We don't have biological children. Our house on Maplewood Lane is still quiet most days, but now it holds new laughter when Sophie visits. It holds letters and memories and a deeper understanding of the man I chose to spend my life with. Love isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's shown in silent sacrifices, in keeping promises made in fire and smoke, in choosing compassion when no one is watching. I turned to David and kissed him softly. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. He smiled in the dark. Thank you for believing in me even when it was hard. Outside, the world continued on. Inside, our hearts had grown larger than we ever thought possible. 14 years of hidden love had not ended our story. It had only just begun to reveal its truest beauty.